There you go.
You're listening to Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. Small town feel with big time ideas. After all, you are entitled to Brad's opinion. Here's your host, Brad Allard.
Well, it's just me today. I'm going to be talking about a few things on my heart and mind about what's going on in the world today, particularly at the state and local level, as well as what's going on nationally. How you doing, Josh?
Doing all right. How are you?
Well, good, because I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions. Did you do that homework I sent you?
Forget about that.
Yeah, it must have dropped the email. Okay, I get it. Anyway, what I'm going to talk about today, in my humble opinion, is what conservatism is and what it is not. And my concerns are of such that we have conflated conservatism with Republican Party, which the Republican Party in its past was the more conservative party, but what some of the policies they're pursuing now in no way can be called conservative. Now, and I put this out there on a Facebook that this is what I'm going to be talking about. I had a couple of responses. A couple of them were kind of snotty, but I don't care. If that's the worst thing it said to me today, then whoop-de-doo. But basically, what makes you think, Mr. Allard, you know all about it? Well, I will put my conservative credentials up against anybody else's. And I do believe I do know something about the court system and whatnot. And most people that know me pretty well know that I'm nobody's idea of a liberal, even though I've been called that before. And that many of the policies that are being pursued right now in no way reflected the Republican Party that I voted for 10, 15, 20 years ago. And a lot of Republican friends have said the same thing. And to be fair, a lot of my Democrat friends say the same thing about their party. But I'm not talking about their party too much today. I mean, I may allude to the Democrats occasionally, but really this conversation is between me and my conservative and Republican friends. And I invite everybody else to listen to this conversation, if you will. But the point is, what I'm making is that the Republican Party and the conservative viewpoints are diverging very, very quickly. And we've gotten into a mindset that if it's Republican, it's conservative, and it's good. And that is not only not thinking the matter through, but it's dangerous. And the same thing with the Democrats. The Democrat Party used to be much more moderate, if you will, and particularly in the South, it was downright conservative. And now, of course, it's gone on its tangent. But that's for another show. Today, what has bothered me more than anything else about the Republican Party is it no longer adheres to even a broad set of principles, but basically it's whatever Mr. Trump or Abbott and Patrick and Paxton say it is. And that's not good for us. It's not good, definitely not good for the party, and it's not good for the country. But before I jump on that, I'm going to briefly mention the sponsors, who I must put this caveat out there. This is me talking, not them talking. So there you are. And they're free to disagree or not. They generally avoid this kind of conversation, but that they do support this kind of open conversation on the air, and I appreciate that. Thank you to Otto at our place and at Gina's. We appreciate what you do for our community. We appreciate the not just the service and the food, but all the other things you provide for our community, meeting places and a place for people to get together. And I've been in these places, and I've had these kind of conversations, and it's a very safe place to do it. And I really appreciate that. Thank you to John at Old Pro Roofing. 817-734-2756. You get your roof checked pretty soon, because as we go into May and June with some heavy-duty weather months, you might want to make sure your roof is in good shape. Thank you to Jeff Kelly at the Jeff Kelly Realtors with the Wethington Agency, 817-781-0546. I'm going to have him on the show in about a month or so to talk about what's going on with the markets and all that. Thank you to our friends at Hotworks. If you really want to have a great endorsement, you got to listen to yesterday's show. Sarah Nicole Tynan really knows, she's a member, she knows all about it, and she was really, really effusive in her praise for Hotworks over on John Jones. So check that out if you're looking for some sort of workout regimen. Thank you to Tiffany Jane, Local Life Magazine. You should have your magazine by Friday or Saturday. Usually it's there by the second day of the month, almost routinely, and it goes to 30,000 homes, so you get quite a bit of coverage there with that. Thank you to Cody O'Brien with the Burleson Buzz. I use this material for the radio show quite a bit, which, by the way, you can hear 4 times a day, 8, 12, 4, and usually 7:30 or 8 in the evening. So what's going on locally with all this business, and we got a lot of it going on at this time of year. Got the carnival coming up, the honey tour we have, several events coming up in the next 2 weeks, so I'll talk about that towards the end. And thank you to Jerry at Medicare Counseling and Therapy, 817-992-8034, or GFCAVANA, GF Kavanaugh at swbell.net. He's over at the, I don't know what they call that building anyway, but it's where the Rim and Rio Mambo is. It's on the 3rd floor, so take the elevator. Okay, thank you very much, guys. I'm going to be a little dry today okay. Here's the deal. How am I defining conservatism? Well, I define conservatism in the classical sense. I teach this in my class, that the classical liberalism is what conservatism is today. And a lot of people confuse that because they think liberal in one term. But back in the day, so to speak, when you were considered to be a classical liberal, in every way you'd be very, very much in line with conservative minds of today. What is that? What is the conservative mindset, so to speak? And it's basically, it's pretty easy. It's rule of law. It's not rule of a person. It's not rule by fiat. It's the rule of law through democratic processes. It's equality before the law. It's not that one class or one type of person should get a different type of justice or different type of treatment from the government. Another conservative aspect, free rights, the free expression rights of speech, of religion, of the press. That's what's under attack in some ways today. Also, free markets. Okay, free markets. That's a basic cornerstone of conservative thought. Thank you, Arma. I see your comment there. Thanks very much. And the tariffs are in no way in compliance, shall we say, with conservative mindset, and I'll get into that. Also, local governing, as local as possible, and that's being taken away from us by the state of Texas. In many ways, I've talked to several people in city governing, and they are concerned, very much so, that the laws that are being considered and have already passed take away a city's ability to govern. Also, the idea in the conservative mindset is that people should be allowed to rise as their talents and opportunities take them, and not pick winners and losers. Now, 3 areas in which I'm going to be looking at specifically, I guess, in this is going to be the areas of deportations, the areas of the tariffs, and also some of the state issues that are going on. And then I have some couple of comments towards the end about how our governments are regarding some of the people in our society and how they are relegating them to a different status, shall we say. But I'll say that at the end. Let's talk about the deportations. First of all, let's make a few things clear. I'm not into whataboutism or both sidesism, but I think it needs to be put in perspective, is that the number of deportations that Mr. Trump is attempting and wants to attempt will have to go a long way to match Mr. Obama's. Mr. Obama, in the last 20 years, I'm looking at the deportations the last quarter century, and Obama leads the league by a ton in terms of number of deportations. He had over 3 million in his 8 years. Mr. W. Bush had 1.8 million in his 8 years. Mr. Biden comes in way behind. He had about 750,000, almost half of those in his last year when he started becoming much more strict on the border. Mr. Trump has said he wants to have 1 million deportations every year. Well, that's going to be a challenge. Even the media, even people inside his administration said that's going to be a challenge. But it's really not that. I am not in favor of illegal immigration, okay? And let's be real clear. I am not in favor of open borders. I'm not in favor of basically a lack of a vetting process of any immigration. And to deport illegal residents in our country is not only part of our law, but it is part of every culture, every country around. Every country deports non-legal residents in their country. We're not unique in any regard about that. But that being said, how we do it is everything that's important. I've read many times about how these illegal immigrants do not deserve due process of law. They don't deserve the process that we would attribute to a citizen. That is not correct. And it hasn't been part of our mindset or thinking for well over a century. In 1890, or rather, I'm looking again, 1886, there was a Supreme Court case that basically said that residents are still entitled to due process under the law. And it was reconfirmed in 1903. And the 1886 case was about a Chinese immigrant, and the 1903 case was about a Japanese immigrant, and the country was trying to remove them, and they sued, and the courts, and if you know anything about the Supreme Court, those courts back around the turn of the 20th century were hyper-conservative. They all said that immigrants are entitled to all the due process of law that a citizen is. So when I read on the Facebook or these other social medias that these people aren't deserving of due process, first of all, that's un-American. Second of all, that's not correct. Because we're talking about 130 years of Supreme Court precedents. Now, if they want to disagree with the Supreme Court about that, be my guest. But the proposition that somehow these courts are manufacturing due process in the last 3 months in terms of these immigrants is not correct. We've had it on the books for, like I said, 125 years. Okay? So even when we were deporting immigrants at a much greater rate than now, they still got due process because that's what the courts and our law says. Now, I want to clarify things. If we can't afford to have large masses of unaccounted for illegal immigrants in our country for a lot of different reasons. And I know that some of them have criminal activities, most of them do not. But I do believe that the fact that we cannot be this open border society and let everybody and their dog in, but that's another case altogether. However, we have to treat each individual with the due process of law that our government and our laws and our Constitution require. And yes, I get irritated a little bit sometimes when a judge in California makes a ruling that applies to all over the country, but and that's another conversation too. But the point is that this is not something that the liberal courts have just made up in the last year or so. This is what's been going on in our adult lives, all our lives. And I get concerned very much when people, inspired by comments made by Mr. Trump, say that these people are not deserving of the due process and quality under the law. Now, a lot of people are making a big deal about this Comar Abrego Garcia, okay? I would have zero problem deporting him according to the due process. I have a big problem without due process, and I have a bigger process in dropping him in some El Salvador jail without any kind of court trial at all. I know he's been accused of crimes here in the United States, and I get it, but accused is not the same thing as being convicted. And so basically what we've done with Mr. Abrego Garcia is taken him and thrown him in jail without a trial. And we would never, that's a gross violation of due process. We would never allow that here. And you say, well, he's not a citizen. Like I said 2 minutes ago, it doesn't matter. He's still, according to our Constitution, under the 14th and 5th Amendments, he is still entitled to this process. So for us basically to pull him out of Maryland, where he's from, and drop him in El Salvador prison is wrong. Now, if you want to go through the whole process and take him back to El Salvador, where he's originally from, fine. But then let them decide what to do with him about, the court systems. Or if you want to try him for some crime here, then try him like it's supposed to happen. All right? Now, so when the court said you need to bring this guy back, and the Trump administration basically stubs their nose at it, that's not conservative. Conservative theology, if you will, conservative ideology maybe is a better word. Conservative ideology requires rule of law, adherence to the courts, not because if you like it or not. All right, there's rulings that the courts have made that we could, could sit across from a liberal friend, and we could both point out court cases that we find to be highly irritating. But it is the court system. Okay, Ms. Crisp says, if one person goes without due process, we could all go without due process. The Fifth Amendment says any person, not any citizen. How do you prove legal status without due process? And yeah, then that's true. Now, due process is cumbersome, and it's expensive, and it takes time, and it's not just to protect Mr. Abrego Garcia. It's here to protect you, and it's here to protect me and Josh over there and all the other people in this building. You know, people say, well, it's only going to apply to, say, illegal citizens or residents here, rather. They're not citizens, but legal residents. That's. I do believe in the slippery slope kind of thinking sometimes. If it applies to people, you know, that we don't like, so to speak, or the administration doesn't like, what's going to happen when a new administration comes in and there's a new class of people they don't like? You know, a new hyper-liberal administration comes in and they don't like evangelicals. I don't know. You pick out the group. And the precedent has been set that due process only applies to those they like, to whoever the administration deigns to give it to. Due process is not a right. It's not a negotiable with whoever is in the White House or the governor's office or anybody else. We don't put it up for a vote. It's non-negotiable. And then you fuel the fire with stupid comments about, like Mr. Trump, and he talks to the El Salvador president. Maybe we'll send you a few homegrowns as well. Well, who knows if, you know, the thing about Trump, he says stupid stuff sometimes, and people take it seriously or don't take it seriously, and sometimes he's trolling and sometimes he's not. It doesn't matter. You throw it out there in public conversation, and it's frightening to certain people. It should be. Okay? It's not funny. If he's just joking or trolling or making some offhand comment, it's not funny. It's serious. The president can't be involved in trolling people like you do on Facebook or Twitter or X or whatever else you want to call it. It's not funny because he actually has the authority to make things happen. He has the administration and all the tools it has behind him to make that happen. So it's not funny. And so when people say, well, if I'm making a bigger deal out of this due process than I should be, if we don't make a big deal out of this now, we're going to have to make a big deal out of it later when the target is going to be somebody else's other, if you will, somebody else's target. And maybe you might be part of that target. So this whole immigration thing, deportation, needs to be done in the right way. And if it's not done in the right way, then it violates who we are as a country and what we claim to stand for as a government and what we claim to stand for as Republicans and conservatives. And I'll say that again. Republican Party used to stand for the rule of law. And if it doesn't stand for it in this case now, then they have basically jettisoned that aspect of their party. Okay? Now let's talk about some other stuff. How about the tariffs? Well, I've made a show about the tariffs before, and I think they're terrible. Okay? They're absolutely terrible. Because, first of all, Mr. Trump does not understand one whit about what's going on with trade. Every time we buy something from a foreign country and we give them our money, what are they going to do with that money? They return it back into the United States in form of investments, buying our bonds and stocks, buying American business, buying American products. Okay? Trade is a circular thing. Okay, so if we have a trade deficit, with country X of $50 billion, they have $50 billion of our money. What are they going to do with it? They can't spend it within their own country, so they will return it back to our country in other forms, like buying our stuff and buying, investing in our stocks and bonds, things of that nature. I teach this in my economics class. And the idea that we are somehow poor because of trade deficits is ridiculous. I could tell you all the data, and in fact, I think I will. Okay, because it's nuts that we have a situation where we think that we are being ripped off by the rest of the world. There was a time that about 40 to 42% of all trade went through the United States, and even now it's still nearly a third. Still is based in the United States. That's a lot of people working in a lot of jobs that produce products that the rest of the world is buying. And if we're buying other people's stuff in such large numbers, that's only thing that's going to, the benefit to them and the benefit to us is that it's going to make it so that maybe they are a little less poor, a little less politically unstable. They're living a little better life, and they're going to be more of a trading partner. And everybody thinks the Chinese have got it so great. They don't. The average Mexican citizen makes more money per year than the average Chinese citizen does. China ranks around Serbia in terms of average income per person. Okay, so we're not, the idea that China and all these billionaires are taking over everything, they have massive numbers of lower middle class and poorer people. And it's not going to do us any good to keep them in that status as a country. And I'm not meaning just in a humanitarian sense. We could take humanitarianism completely out of this trade discussion and look at it strictly from our own perspective. We benefit from free trade. And these tariffs that Mr. Trump has imparted, I think, has more to do with his personal aggrandizement than it does with economic theory. I'll quote him, even though I'm not used to swearing on the show too much, but he was telling some reporters last week on the plane, I got all these countries calling from all over the world to kiss my ass. That's what it's about. He wants that kind of pleading being done, not just by foreign countries, but also by businesses here in the United States and by Republican and Democrat senators coming to him with their hat in their hand and say, please, Mr. Trump, please give us an exemption. And this is, again, not a conservative mindset. Conservative ideology does not pick economic winners and losers. And again, if you want to say, well, Biden did it and all this, that's why they're not conservative. I'm not here to talk about how they should have done it. I'm talking about how conservatives and Republicans who have traditionally called themselves conservatives in the past have called it. And it's not conservative for the government to pick winners and losers, either through subsidies or carve-outs in the tariff that only can be applied if they are on Mr. Trump's good side. And if they contribute to the Republican Party as it exists now. It says, all right, Ms. Chris says, we need to address the fact that North Korea and Russia were left off the tariff list. What do you think that signals to the rest of the world? Well, it's a bad signal, but the reason we don't buy hardly anything. We buy zero from North Korea. So it was, and we buy very little from Russia. I mean, I think our total trade with Russia last year was like $3 billion, which that's a rounding error. But I do think visually they should have been put on the list just because, it does look bad. And if they think that they are going to, if Mr. Trump is going to try to ingratiate himself with those dictators by keeping them off the list, he's being played like a Stradivarius violin, and not just in this case either. But the point also when I'm making about the tariffs is that because of the tariffs, how is it going to affect us locally is already, it's starting to impact the supply chain. And, my son and I were talking about this over the weekend. He's pretty well read on this. And then, son of a gun, I'm reading the Washington Post this morning, and they're a conservative columnist, a gentleman whom I really like and recommend to y'all if you like conservative columnists. And yes, he is in the Washington Post. They do have a few, him and George Will both. They talk about how the ports are reporting massive backlogs of, they're not getting the trade off the docks, and there's trade being withheld off the docks and trade being there's that the numbers here. I'm going to kind of just read off Mr. Garrity's ideas. And again, Mr. Garrity is one of the prime writers for the National Review, which, if you know anything about the National Review, it's very conservative. It has been for 70 years, all right? So, again, the National Review and the Wall Street Journal are the two most, in my opinion, the two most respected conservative journals, and they are hostile, to say the least, to these tariffs. But anyway, I'm quoting Mr. Garrity here. The most spectacular self-inflicted economic wound of all time is already here. We are beginning to see the flow of cargo to the port of Los Angeles slow, says Gene Soroka, Executive Director of the Port of Los Angeles. It's my prediction that in 2 weeks' time, arrivals will drop by 35%, as essentially all shipments out of China from major retailers and manufacturers have ceased, and cargo coming out of Southeast Asia locations is much softer than normal with the tariffs now in place. And I'm going to quote Mr. Garrett again. Again, he's quoting the port director from the Port of Los Angeles. He says, we also see that inventory on shelves and in procurement facilities shrinking. Many major retailers have told us they've got about a 6 to 8 week supply of inventory in their systems now that will quickly dry up. United States consumers and manufacturers alike will find difficult decisions in the weeks and months to come if policies don't change. And basically, so basically about mid-June to mid-July is when these tariffs really will start taking impact. And he said, well, great, well, buy American. Yeah, your American goods will be more expensive as well. And I mentioned this on the last show. Tariffs don't leave domestic prices unaffected at all. If a Chinese product goes up by 50%, the American-made product will go up by 40% and still be cheaper by comparison. But it's still going to be more expensive than it would have been otherwise. And so this idea that, we're going to be strengthening the American economy for this has been proven over and over and over again to be false. Economic growth is stymied by tariffs around the world. And the idea that, we had they had massive tariffs against American goods. In some products, yes. But overall, there were numerous products that had no tariff at all. And our average tariff in Germany, for example, was 3%. And, and you can pick out this product or that product or this commodity or that commodity and say, well, they put high tariffs on it. Like I understand that Canada puts high tariffs on American dairy products, but they don't put high tariffs on everything made in America. It was on an individual basis based on the political clout of people back home. It's like Japanese and the rice producers. We can make rice here cheaper than they can, actually, and it's helped the Chinese consumer and the Japanese consumer. Who I'm talking about, the Japanese consumer, tremendously to have access to American rice because they'd have cheaper rice prices. But the rice farmers in Japan have a great deal of political influence. Tariffs are really not about economics. It's about power. It's about politics. That's what tariffs are about. They're not about economics. They're about power politics and who is going to be on the inside and who's going to be the outside. And it really distresses me greatly to see so many members of the Republican Party in Congress, particularly those who have been there a long time, so completely abdicate this position. There are people that have been in Congress for a couple of decades or more, and they were adamant free traders under George W. Bush and under Bill Clinton, who was a free trading Democrat, under Reagan and under Bush, H.W. Bush, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now they say nothing. I'd like to ask the members of Congress now, where is your spine? Because this is hurting local businesses. My friend Lacey Vickers says it's going to kill small businesses. You bet it is. I could talk to several people in Burleson who get a lot of their product from foreign sources, particularly in clothing. Those boutiques and these smaller outfits and retailers, they're going to get hammered. And as far as somebody like a Walmart or Target shopper, when you buy your clothing or other products there or, hand tools, you fill in the blank, it's going to be more expensive. Now they say, well, we're going to bring jobs back to America. What kind of jobs? The jobs that we didn't want in the first place. Mass manufacturing jobs are not the kind of jobs we want. We want high-tech, high-paying jobs, not jobs punching out millions of widgets every day. I've said this before. The jobs and the factories that Mr. Trump is trying to bring back to America, for the most part, are things that we left a long time ago. We don't mass produce products here in the United States, nor do we want to. We want to produce custom products, high-end products, high-tech products. We are 50% more productive now than we were 40 years ago. Yet we have 3 million less workers in the manufacturing fields. So we lost 3 million jobs over the last 40 years, and we're 50% higher in productivity. And those people that remain in those fields, in the manufacturing fields, are better paid and have better benefits than the people 40 years ago did, unions notwithstanding. So the jobs that we want here, we're not going to bring back with tariffs. And, and you could, I could see people say, well, I saw on this newscast or this whatever that this company is going to be putting in a lot of money and blah, blah, blah. And I get it, I really do. But that's not making up for what we're losing. Okay. Hang on a minute. Just had a glitch there. Okay. Now I'm back. Hey, Josh, will you contact Taylor and tell him I need the link? Okay, because I don't have it yet. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. When I talk about the jobs we want high-tech, high-paying, high-trained jobs, not standing in front of an assembly line and like Laverne and Shirley did in their opening, and watching the beer bottles go by, or Lucy and Ethel. That's not the jobs that pay. And the fact that people in Vietnam do those kind of jobs and they get paid better than what they would otherwise is a net win for both of us. And these tariffs are destroying that. So these tariffs are not conservative. And they used to not be Republican until, 3/4 or 5/5 or whatever, most of the Republican Party basically abdicated on this. Let's go to another topic, local control. Dan Patrick and Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton are not conservatives. And I don't care what they say. Conservatism is not taking away our ability to control our localities. What I think they do is they see Austin, whom they despise because they're more liberal, and they apply across the state all these restrictions, such as there's bills in front of them right now that would take away the ability of cities to have zoning control and housing control. There are bills right now in front of the House and Senate that would basically take away our ability to maintain certain standards in building, and they already have in other ways. But they'll take away certain certain abilities to make say apartment manufacturers or home manufacturers adhere to certain zoning and quality conditions. There are bills right now that this one probably get passed that will move our election day to November and not in May, as we've had for decades. And so basically it's going to tie our local elections to state and national elections, which who does that benefit? It benefits the parties in control because the turnout's greater. Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because it's unfortunate that we have to go to such lengths to get higher turnout in our local elections. Here I am sharing this with several people now, so give me just a moment. I usually do this when the other person's talking, but since it's just me rattling on, there you go.
I can distract him if you want.
Yeah, you can. Tell us a joke. Good. No, anyway, I got it here. But this local governing is a very important aspect of conservative ideology, closer to the ground, closer to the people, and it's being taken away one by one by one. And I have other concerns about that trio taking away also other rights as well. Right to free speech. They are pursuing cases against school districts that dare to speak out against school vouchers. Do they have a case? It doesn't matter. They could just make life difficult and expensive. That's one reason I was kind of bugged with local BISD people. Hey, how come you ain't speaking of this? I got the message. They didn't want to risk the wrath of Ken Paxton. That is not conservative. And these laws that penalize people for not being in accordance to what they think they should be is not conservative. Conservative doesn't necessarily mean they have a moralistic religious view on everything in life. There are numerous conservatives, secular conservatives in public life, George Will and the late Charles Krauthammer and all this. But conservatism believes in the worth of the individual. Okay? Now, I'm going to mention a touchy subject. I am pro-life. I believe that abortion is a tragic thing, and it's been way too often used as an expedient to alleviate certain situations. And I am pro-life, and I strongly support Next Step Women's Center. And I would encourage everybody that is in that condition to keep the child. That being said, putting me in a position where if I know of somebody getting an abortion and I don't say anything about it to the authorities, I could be held liable. That's trash. All right? There are laws that are being considered and have been passed that basically would give me a reward if I knew of somebody getting an abortion and I would report them to the authorities and I would get a cash reward. What the hell is that? Okay? That kind of society I don't want to be part of. And neither does Next Step Women's Center. We talked about this before, and it's going to hurt them because they're going to be people that are concerned that if they go to Next Step to talk about their pregnancy and they don't choose to keep it, which is an option with Next Step, even though they are there to help you bring that baby to full term and help you bring it, give it what it needs to get a good start and all that. That's what they're all about. But if they have said that every now and then they have a young woman that says, I'm not going to keep the baby, Next Step could be held liable under some of these laws if they didn't report that. That's crazy. And it's going to hurt their business because you're going to have a lot of young women that may be on the fence about it, and they're going to be concerned that they're going to be ratted out by Next Step or other like institutions. It blows my mind that the people that support this think that's a pro-life approach to doing things. It's hurting that position. And as far as the way the laws are written, a woman who has a miscarriage can be considered to be liable under the law. And so will the doctors that treat that woman that's having a miscarriage. Now, and before anybody hears this and gets indignant and think I'm in favor of abortion, people that know me know I'm not. But I'm not also going to be in favor of prosecuting them under the law for a miscarriage, nor am I going to be in favor of a society in which we're telling on each other for fun and profit. I just, it blows my mind to think that Paxton and Patrick and the rest of that crowd think that this is a conservative pro-life measure. As does the school vouchers, which I've talked about before. Another conservative ideological point is basically a free market system that you can achieve what you can achieve based on not just, maybe good fortune, good circumstances, hard work, opportunity, native intelligence, whatever. But one thing you don't rely on in a conservative ideology is government support. And that's what vouchers are. It's basically putting one class of people over the other. Because the way this voucher bill that just passed, there's going to be $1 billion set aside, and they'll say, well, it only applies to people that make $100,000 or less. Well, I could tell you right now, the average tuition at most of your more expensive private schools, more elite private schools, is anywhere from $25,000 to $30,000 per year. So if you're able to afford $30,000 a year and making less than $100,000, you really don't have a budget. So, okay, we'll give you $10,000. You're still going to have to come up with the other $20,000. And the law is written that if there's any money left over, it'll go to other applicants. Fill in the blank, other applicants, meaning people at Southwest Christian, Trinity Valley, Country Day, the Episcopal School, St. Mark's, Nolan Catholic, you name it. And it's not the religious aspect of it that bugs me. What bugs me is that the people that send their kids to these schools anyway already have the wherewithal to do it, and we're going to subsidize that, basically. Okay, they say that fund will rise to about $4 billion eventually. All right, Emma's going back to the abortion issue. It would lead to underground abortions and death. Well, I am not unhappy that we've restricted abortion somewhat in the state. What I'm unhappy about is that it's defined it in such a way that it makes criminals out of people in tragic situations. And we defined it in such a way that what really is not an abortion, but can be considered one, is now punishable under the law. I just want to, I always am uncomfortable talking about the abortion issue because I understand in some drastic situations there are exceptions and emergency situations and extreme situations, and I understand that piece of it. But apparently the lawmakers don't, and that's where I'm getting at. Okay, now back to the vouchers. The thing about the vouchers is that it's going to go up to $4 billion, and that's going to pretty much encompass most people that are sending their kids at these schools already. Now, I sent my children to Holy Cross when they were younger because I wanted the Christian aspect of their education, and I didn't expect the public schools to provide that. I didn't want the public schools to provide that. So I ponied up the money, Robin and I did, and there you go. And I didn't expect the state to help me with that. I didn't want the state to help me out with that. Okay? And Ms. Vicker says, back to the abortion issue, it hamstrings medical practitioners too, and that's true because now the practitioners are in a position that if there is a life and death situation, they could be held criminally liable, and they may not want to deal with that. And that's true. Okay, you may have a situation where the life of the mother's at risk. You have a situation where there's a miscarriage going on that may make it difficult for that woman to have future pregnancies, and that doctor he or she may not be able to do anything about it because of the law. And so that's a correct point, certainly. All right, I know I keep getting bounced off, but I want to respond to people that are taking the time to watch the show. Anyway, on the vouchers issue, that's not a conservative viewpoint. The fact that most of these kids are going to Christian schools, that's immaterial. It's the idea that you're choosing winners and losers again. Here's the thing. I read this yesterday from Mr. Will's article about he wants to abolish the Department of Education, which I'm not really against at all. I think Department of Education is not so great. I'm not a big fan of it at all. But he cites a report that came out in 1965. He said, I'm going to read it, that what are the attributes that make for a successful school and student? Okay? He says that they're basically 5 factors: days absent from school, hours spent watching television or social media in today's world, pages read for homework, quantity and quality of reading matter in the home, and 2 parents in the home. What is the government going to do about that? And so that the thing is, these vouchers are going to basically support people that already have these assets in their life, and the ones that don't have it are going to be left behind even further. Now, money is not the solution to everything, and that's what Mr. Will's point is here. But the idea that this money is going to go to those families that already have these assets working in their favor. Most of my students at Southwest Christian came from 2-parent families, maybe not the original set. There were step-parents and things of that nature, certainly. But they also had access to intellectual material. They went on trips. They went to a museum, and not on school field trips, but on their own. They had ample amount of homework to do. They on and on and on. They already had these advantages, and all this voucher program is doing is amplifying those that have these assets and taking away from those who don't. That's not conservative. One last thing. Conservatives do not disregard courts, regardless of the rulings. Okay? Doesn't mean they have to like it, and they can work to change it, but they can't ignore it. And that's what's happening here. Now, again, people say, well, Mr. Biden ignored it about school loans. Absolutely, to his shame and discredit. And the fact that, people may be helped by it, that's immaterial because you can't ignore the court rulings. We don't have to like the court. And if we don't like what the court said, we can either change the law or eventually change the personnel. But here's an example. The court ruled 7-2 to bring back that gentleman from El Salvador, that Abrego Garcia. The 2 that voted no were Alito and Thomas. No, I'm right. All right, Alito and Thomas. Thomas appointed by George H.W. Bush, Alito by George W. Bush. The 3 that were appointed by Trump, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Bennett, all voted against Mr. Trump, so to speak. Those three conservative justices that everybody's concerned about voted with Roberts and the three liberals. And I read stuff that it's wrong that a judge in Hawaii can pass an injunction that goes nationwide. I agree, and it needs to be changed, but that's not the rule it is now. This isn't Calvin Ball, if you know what I'm talking about. Josh, you know what Calvin Ball is?
It might be a little bit before my time.
Yeah, Calvin and Hobbes.
There we go.
Calvin just makes up the rules as he goes. You know, if you don't like what the judge in California said about this, remember two things. One is you could change that. And even Lena Kagan 2 years ago said in a speech that needs to be looked at really closely. She thought it was also problematic that one judge in one of these 94 districts can issue a nationwide injunction. And there's some legislation right now that would address that. But also, the Republicans used it to their advantage during the Biden and Obama years. Whereas the anti-Trump crowd goes to California or Hawaii or District of Columbia or Virginia to try to get liberal rulings. When Biden and Obama were president, we went to Texas or we went to Louisiana or Mississippi or Utah and had a federal judge there do the same thing. Okay? This court shopping has to end, but right now, that's the game as it's being played. And for any kind of administration to say, we don't care, we're not going to abide by that ruling, and be encouraged to do so by many elected officials, both at the state and national level, that's disgraceful. And it's dangerous. Last week, Jonah Goldberg wrote an article for the Dispatch, which is I highly recommend, another conservative outlet that is very, very thoughtful. And even if you're not conservative much yourself, I would advise that in the review in the Wall Street Journal because it's thoughtful conservatism, not knee-jerk conservatism. But anyway, Goldberg said, Republicans, you're going to rue the day you allowed this to happen because as soon as there's a Democrat president, whether it's in 28 or 32 or whenever, they're going to do the same thing and take it one step further. And then when a Republican returns to office, they'll take it one step further. You keep moving the line on these things, and pretty soon that line basically is meaningless. And the sanctity of the courts will be meaningless. Yeah, the courts have ruled many times over my lifetime, things that just drove me nuts, and I hated it. But I never thought the courts were invalid. Now, again, the Democrats have some of the blame of this themselves because particularly during the Biden administration, they were making attempts to possibly impeach Alito and Thomas, and they were talking about how it isn't valid anymore. So they set the stage for some of this. But that's not to their credit, or it's to their shame. Now, do we as conservatives want to share in that shame? Just because the other side did it doesn't mean we are entitled to do it, nor should we want to be. What should we want to be as conservatives and as Republicans is we want to be consistent. We want to stay true to our thinking and our basic principles. And we don't want to just use politics and political expediency to get around it. One last thing. One thing conservative ideology does not do is it creates outsiders in our society. And that's what's happening here. In some cases, I'm referring primarily now to the gay and lesbian community. Every family I know has a gay relative, family member, friend, etc. And whereas as people that aren't gay may not see it clearly or feel it, a lot of these people that are gay and lesbian are very, very concerned. And do they need to be concerned? How could they not be when you have some of the things that are being said by Patrick, Abbott, and Paxton? Look, let's be clear. I'm not in favor of young men playing in women's sports. I am not in favor of them going into restrooms at the high school. But after a certain age of maturity, so to speak, what they do is immaterial to me. Okay? Once they become out in the real world, hey, it's between them and their conscience and God and whomever else they care to bring into it. But yeah, I do believe at the young ages there should be some sort of understanding about boys go here, girls go there, and then after that, when they leave the institution of high school or whatever, then so be it. But they all feel threatened. And I see this not just on Facebook, but other social media, that whereas, you and I that aren't gay would look around and say, what are they talking about? They could point out comments, they could point out, proposals. And the thing about it is, not everything that's proposed becomes law, but it's indicative of a mindset. If a member of the Texas legislature proposes something and he gets numerous signatures on it, that's indicative of a mindset. We need to make sure that we don't have to endorse their lifestyle, but we need to respect the fact that there are fellow citizens with every right we have, and we need to respect the fact that they deserve protection under the law and protection from nitwits who think it incumbent upon themselves to do something about it. Like I said a few minutes ago, everybody that listening to this, and I don't know how many will, know somebody in this situation. They know a gay or a lesbian person, maybe a trans person, but mostly gay and lesbian that I know. Okay, I'll just put it that way. Their fear is not based on some irrational concept. Their fears are legitimate. And we as conservatives need to make sure that our society is created, that their lives have every opportunity and rights that ours do. Okay? You don't have to say or endorse or support or whatever. Your personal opinion is a personal opinion. But as far as we as a society and as a government are concerned, if we're creating an outside class of people that are concerned about their safety, their well-being, their future possibilities of employment, then we are not following the conservative ideology at all, and nor would that be a Republican one either. And so I'm going to leave it at that because, I'm not real comfortable talking about some of these issues. The two issues I've always had a hard time talking about is abortion and lifestyle choices, shall we say, because we all have strong views on that. But the bottom line is, particularly when it comes to the gay and lesbian community, there are our friends, our family, our neighbors, our fellow citizens, and they deserve every aspect of the law's benefits and protections. And they do not need to be treated publicly by our elected officials as others, or it doesn't apply to you, or some of the things that you took for granted we may take away from you. And whether or not you think that's a rational fear or not, it's a very real fear for them. And it's our responsibility as Americans to make sure that all people have the rights that they need and the protections and the benefits of this country. And that's all I have to say about that. Anyway, there's a couple of things I'd be remiss if I didn't remember. May 3rd, there's this Beauty and Bliss thing going on over at the Burleson. It's like a convention center. Do you still have that logo over there, Josh? I believe we do.
Beauty and Bliss?
Yeah, that's the one.
Give me a sec.
Okay, he's looking it up. I kind of threw a curveball at him. But anyway, I thank you, Irma and Lacey, for participating because it gives me something to bounce it off of. I hope I made myself pretty clear. I would like for people out there to share this. If people don't agree with me, that's fine. I had a couple of snotty comments before the show about, who cares about your opinion? Well, I guess Lacey and Irma do. So there's two. And so, but anyway, also, when I think about this, the Cinco de Mayo is on this. Cinco de Mayo is 7 o'clock over at the Vera Calvin Plaza. And it's a very great deal. I love Cinco de Mayo. I really do. I mean, I'm not trying to be like, down with the Hispanics, try to ingratiate myself to them. I really like Cinco de Mayo. I love Mexican food. I love Mexican culture. And also, it's a fun time to see your neighbors. Also, the 1 to 5 is the Beauty and Bliss. Did you find that one in the list?
No, unfortunately.
Oh, that must, okay.
Kind of lost in the archives. Sorry.
No problem. Anyway, it's over And on 1150 Southwest Burleson Boulevard, which is on the highway, it's that white building that used to be the SPJST building. And it's basically going to be 4 hours of pampering for massages and facials and nails and things of that nature. And so it's going to be, a lot of vendors there and things of that nature, some food trucks. Jessica Pounds has asked me to promote that, and I've been promoting it on the radio station. And so we also have next week, we have the open house on the 12th and the 14th. Well, that's not next week. It's in a couple of weeks for the Center for ASD. So that's a big one. Of course, we have coming up, we have the Honey Tour coming up on the 22nd through 25th, the Honey Tour and the Carnival that comes with it. I believe the bike race itself is on the 23rd. Next week, I believe, let's see, who do I have next week? I want to make sure. Just to make sure, because sometimes I say, we're going to have this, and I forget. Next week, we're going to have the Chamber of Commerce. I'm sorry. I got something caught in my throat again. Chamber of Commerce will be here. And then I'm working on a date for the 9th, for the next Thursday. I'm going to be out Tuesday. So I'm working. So if I don't have a guest, I'll be doing maybe part 2 of this rant, but whatever. So also remind you about The Journey, 88.3. I don't ask them to promote my political shows, but they do ask them to promote the shows that deal with public service, like I did yesterday with Reach Across Johnson County with Erica Byers and Sarah Nicole Tynan. I don't ask them to do this, but I will ask them to promote the other shows that have to do with community interest and things of that nature. Also on the radio station, normally I don't put this kind of material on the radio station, but I think I will this time. Tonight I kind of messed up yesterday. I messed up a bunch. I put the wrong show on last night. I was supposed to put on the Reach Across Johnson County and put it on one of the First Baptist services. So hopefully got some gospel out of it last night. But I'm going to, at 1 o'clock today and 6 o'clock today, I'm going to have the Reach Across Johnson County. So I'll have this on later in the week, maybe like Wednesday and Thursday or something along those lines. Okay, well, I feel better now. I hope y'all do too. Thank you all for listening. Please share, because I'll sum it up this way. I'm very, very concerned about what's going on in this country. And I've been teaching it and experiencing it for a long, long time. And it's caused tremendous division among families. And I could attest to that. Painful divisions among family members and friends and colleagues and churches and workplaces. One last thing. The conservative ideology does not exploit the fears of others. And that is what's happening today in so many ways. And politicians, and both sides, yes, I get it, but politicians on both sides are exploiting that for power and gain. And it's driving our country into an abyss. The divisions that these politicians in both parties and the acquiescence of those in the middle on those parties that let it happen, the cowards in Congress that let it happen in both parties, the cowards in Congress that give power to the presidents to be unchecked and to let them snub the courts with impunity, is driving this country into deeper and deeper trouble. And George Washington ain't coming through that door to save us, or Abraham Lincoln. So that's my concern. My prayer, my hope is that these kind of divisions don't exist in your life, because most people it does, and it's very unpleasant, and I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Josh, for everything.
Thank you.
And we will talk to y'all with Sarah and Melissa next Monday.